Hello and welcome to the Political Brief. I'm Molly Hall. Coming up in today's show, it was a historic year in French politics. The old guard traditional parties were tossed aside as a political novice broke the mold to become president. We look at the ups and downs and winners and losers of 2017. Now, this has certainly been a remarkable year in French politics. In the span of 12 months, France has had its entire political landscape redrawn. A generation of political leaders has been swept aside. New ones are emerging. Look no further than the president, Emmanuel Macron himself. Early on, his startup campaign was widely overlooked, but now he leads the country with a majority in the National Assembly. And his rise to power has shattered the traditional parties. Here's Topika Laurent.
2017 will be remembered, no doubt, as a year that changed the face of French politics. For the first time in the history of the Fifth Republic, neither of the two major political parties made it to the second round in May's election. The year of political upsets, though, began in late 2016 with this bombshell from then-President François Hollande.
I've decided not to run in the presidential election.
Hollande was the first president in the history of the Fifth Republic not to stand for re-election. It left the Socialist Party scrambling to find a successor, and Benoît Hamon emerged victorious. The party, though, abandoned him, and he finished in a humiliating fifth position in the first round of the elections, taking just 6.4% of votes, the party's worst score since 1969.
The left is not dead. So where am I?
Far-left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon tried all he could to fill the political void, even using holograms to be in several places at once. But he failed to make it to the second round. He did, though, manage to pick up 19.6% of votes. That was more than the Socialist Party. On the right, the Conservative candidate, François Fillon, was faring no better. After a steady start, he was rocked by the so-called Penelope Gate scandal and faced accusations of fake jobs and nepotism. He refused to stand down, and his campaign paid the price. Fillon picked up just 20% of votes and failed to make it to the second round.
Un assassinat politique.
He lashed out at what he called a political assassination. Amid the chaos, National Front leader Marine Le Pen was hoping to steer her party to its first ever victory. She made it to the second round with 21.3% of votes. But the period between the two rounds of voting was a fiasco. Her rivals called on their supporters to vote for Emmanuel Macron in the second round, and then her disastrous debate performance exposed her weaknesses on policy.
We want to free ourselves of the euro and transform it into a common currency.
So close and yet so far, Marine Le Pen was defeated by Emmanuel Macron. Against all odds, he became the youngest ever French president at 39. His party, La République En Marche, had formed just a year before, but he managed to convince French voters to believe in his vision.
What I want is for you to help us win, because this is our project. Long live the Republic and long live France.
The rest, then, is history. France opting for untested newcomer Emmanuel Macron over the far-right's Marine Le Pen. Well, President Macron wants to revitalize France, and his efforts are convincing some. This month, The Economist magazine named France the country of the year. Well, as for what the French think of their leader, well, it's been a bumpy ride so far, but Macron is on an upswing. The president now stands at 52% approval rating. Well, that's 10 points higher since October. And as you can see, he's slowly climbing back from a summer nosedive when he lost 24 points. Now, this marks the first time a French president has managed to climb back above the 50% mark. Well, for more on what the president has and has not accomplished, I'm joined now by RFI journalist and French political expert, Philippe Turle. Philippe, so we've got then Emmanuel Macron, who's been on the job now for nearly 8 months. How's his track record so far?
Well, if you'd asked me a year ago in this very studio whether Emmanuel Macron had a chance of winning the elections, I would have said maybe, but not 100%. So here we are, 8 months into this presidency, where not only did he win, but he has an overwhelming majority in the French National Assembly. So more or less he can do what he likes. And I think if you go back to this time last year and the decision by François Hollande, the former president, not to run again, the uncertainty in the political world about exactly where politics was going in France, Emmanuel Macron was the person who was an incarnation of what most French people wanted politics to be. So he has been very clever in organising his own political programme around that. And I think what most French people like now that he's been elected is that he has honoured the pledges during his election campaign to overhaul, for example, the job welfare system in France, to make changes to the taxation system in France, to put France back on the map internationally. So I think most people are very happy with what Emmanuel Macron has done so far. And I'll just give you a figure to make you understand how successful he's been in obtaining the majority in that National Assembly. If you look at the number of seats, there are 577 seats in the National Assembly. Emmanuel Macron's En Marche party has 312 of those 577 seats, so an overwhelming majority. The right wing, which was formerly under Nicolas Sarkozy, has only 98, and the Socialist Party, which was in government until May 2017, has only 28 seats. So Emmanuel Macron can do what he likes, basically, because he has this overwhelming majority. And I think that's what most French people want.
With that being said, then what have we seen so far, in your opinion, as his biggest success?
First of all, being elected for him was the greatest success, a very efficient political manoeuvring that he's obtained. I think his other success is more or less doing away with any opposition in France. He did away with Marine Le Pen, as you said in your introduction. Everybody thought, a lot of people thought, that she may have a chance of winning. She ruined all her chances in that presidential debate between the two rounds. He's more or less demolished the right wing, and the Socialist Party have almost been blown off the map. As far as policies is concerned, his overhaul of the job market, I think, has gone through, despite a lot of people saying it wasn't going to work. He's managed to push that through.
Does it go far enough?
It doesn't. Well, it doesn't really go far enough, but it's a start. Remember that France has always been considered a country which was incapable of introducing reforms. And under François Hollande, I think there was a lot of people very frustrated by the fact that he pledged to reform things and then didn't, because he was frightened of the impact of the unions and not winning the next elections. Emmanuel Macron has this overwhelming majority. He's more or less demolished the unions. People want to wait and see how he's doing, so they're giving him the benefit of the doubt. He's using that to push through these reforms, and there's very little protest about that, even from the unions that haven't managed to get large numbers of people together in the streets of France to protest against the reforms of Emmanuel Macron, so he can basically do what he likes.
Well, considering the fact that he was never elected before to office, before he came to power here, have we seen him stumble anywhere? Any failures that you can see?
I think his biggest handicap is that he's perceived by French people as being the president of the rich. And this is something that is going to be very difficult for him to shake off. There is a lot of expectation about what he's going to do. So he's got to be on all fronts all the time to make all people happy, be it those from the far left, be it those from the far right, those in the centre. So the job in hand is enormous. So far, I'd say he gets like 14 out of 20 on the policies that he's done and the effort that he's made in this first part of his mandate. As you said correctly, it's extremely rare, if not impossible, for a newly elected French president to actually go back up in the opinion polls after they've been elected just a few months later. There's usually this euphoria over the election and then quite often a disappointment very quickly afterwards. He went down, but he's come back up again. No one has managed to do that. And if you look at François Hollande, it was a slow downward spiral right from the beginning to the end. And even Nicolas Sarkozy, who pledged to reform France, went down in the opinion polls and found it very hard to get back up. So Emmanuel Macron has this huge boulevard ahead of him that is more or less open to him to do what he likes, and he has the support of the French people, and they're giving him the benefit of the doubt. So all that is positive for him as we go into 2018.
All right, well, very interesting to see. Philip, thank you very much for that analysis there. And indeed, it was a year full of political upheaval. Let's see who's come out on top and who's licking their wounds. Well, 2017 was rough for conservative François Fillon. His 35-year political career came crashing down over a fake job scandal involving his family. And despite making it through to the second round of the presidential election, Marine Le Pen and her National Front have struggled to keep their footing. Ongoing legal battles and the departure of Le Pen's right-hand man and her niece have destabilized the far-right party. Meanwhile, the socialists are without a true boss and without a home. The party had called it quits just after the stinging presidential defeat, and just this month, the cash-strapped party was forced to sell its longtime headquarters in central Paris. Now, as for the winners, well, there's the obvious choice of President Macron and his party, Republic on the Move, for their successful political gamble. But there's also the far left's Jean-Luc Mélenchon and his party, Unsubmissive France, that is now positioned as the main voice of government opposition in the National Assembly. Meanwhile, Jean-Yves Le Drian gets a nod for staying power after serving 5 years as defense minister under President Hollande. He's now acting foreign minister under President Macron. And last, but certainly not least, there's Edouard Philippe. When he was appointed prime minister, many had never heard of the moderate conservative from Les Républicains party, but now roughly 54% of French approve of how he's leading the French government. Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Thanks for watching, and a very happy New Year to you all. We'll see you next week on The Political Brief.
After years of economic tragedy, Greece is discovering stand-up comedy. Clap if it's your first time, says the compere. The playwright Aristophanes lampooned the elite worlds of politics and art as far back as 425 BC. But live stand-up here is a new art form.
10 years ago, we didn't know what stand-up is, so when I was booking gigs back then, we had to call the bar or the live stage and be like, okay, we're doing stand-up, and then 90% they would ask us, what is that?
I think it's a great idea. A guy on the stage and telling jokes, I think it's super cool.
Many people get a taste for stand-up watching foreign comedians on the internet. But cheap production costs and cheap tickets mean the homegrown scene is starting to blossom.
In these dark times, what I'm going to say is a cliché, but I'm going to say it. People need to laugh.
The government says Greece is on the road to recovery, but youth unemployment is still running at close to 45%. Laughter is a medicine that can bring relief rather than cure.
We can't have any romantic thoughts. We can't live in the clouds. So this is a coping mechanism for us.
The stand-ups riff on everyday life. In cash-strapped Greece, that can mean living with parents, low-wage jobs, or dodging the fare on the bus. But most say they steer clear of talking directly about politics. Some topics are beyond a joke.
Anticipate. Take a stand. Be mobile. Defend your position. Be independent. Meet every challenge. Surprise people. Be a leader. Be equipped to understand the world. France 24.